Welcome, everyone, to another episode of What Exit Jersey Stories. I'm your host, Nick Franco, and with me, as always,
I'm Peter Riario, and go ahead, Wally, introduce yourself.
Yeah.
My name is Wally Van Treek. Right now, I live at the Jersey Shore. I used to live up in North Jersey. I used to work up the show place back in the days.
Great. And,
Excellent.
on that note, let me, just say that when you think of...
I love, by the way, I love your guys' introduction. That was pretty good.
Thank you.
Ben was rocking, definitely.
Oh, thank you. Actually, one of the other gentlemen that engineers for the podcast studio, he did it for he put that together for us. He's got a local band as well.
Yeah.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
They play at the Stone Pony, which I know you've played, Wally, as well in the past,
Played there,
right?
yes.
Yes.
Played there in the past, yep.
Yeah, so I just want to, all our listeners out there, when you think of iconic New Jersey rock clubs, names are usually thrown out. I would say the most common or the most frequent ones are Stone Pony in Asbury Park, the Saint, Asbury Lanes in Asbury Park, the now gone Maxwell's in Hoboken, which actually featured Nirvana at one time. So what if I told you that this unassuming small rock club in Dover, New Jersey, population 18,000. Let me show this. Hold on. I'm going to try because we can you see that? Does that look familiar to you, Wally, at all?
Yes, it does.
It does, right?
Sure does.
Well, Dover, New Jersey, population 18,000. That venue featured some of the biggest musical acts of yesterday and today. Here's the list. It's really remarkable. Bands like the Ramones, Blondie, Talking Heads, Slade, Leslie West, the Runaways featuring Joan Jett and Lita Ford, Cheap Trick, Judas Priest, Slayer, and one of the most notable trivia facts, if you play Trivial Pursuit, maybe this will be a question, it was Kirk Hammett of Metallica's first gig. I want to say that was 1983. Do you know, Wally?
Yes. Yeah, it was 1983.
1983. And I just want to say, we are so lucky today to have someone who knows a bit about the inner workings of the show place. So please say hello to Wally Van Treek. He managed the show place. And correct me if I'm wrong, Wally, it's from 1976 to 1978, and then from time to time well into 1984.
Yeah, I worked then. I went back to college, and when I came back from vacations, I would work at the club then. Whenever they needed me for a big act would come in, and they would had no problem working there. Had a good relationship with the owners always.
Right. Wally, I mean, just reading the history of this place, it was remarkable to me how maybe you want to go into how it was two brothers, is that right? Or like just a little bit of what is your knowledge of the beginnings of the show place?
Okay, what it was two brothers and one of their longtime friends, who was basically the majority owner, Larry Gribler, and then there was Steve and Ben Schiff. There were the two brothers, and when they decided to open up a club, and it was at that time it was called the Scene. And then when they had purchased it, they changed the name to the Place. And they started out as as a disco at first, and had a big dance floor. And they did some disco bands like the Tramps, Gary Tom's Empire, and then
Disco Inferno. Right?
And for people who don't know the Tramps, I mean, they wrote Disco Inferno, right?
Oh yeah, they were big.
One of the biggest disco hits of
Yeah. And so what happened was they decided to have a rock band in there the night before Thanksgiving, which is typically one of the largest nights in the North Jersey club scene.
Oh, yeah.
And they ended up having Another Pretty Face. And so, I don't know if you.
I'm sorry, Wally, and that was like back in 1975, is that right?
That was 1975, yes. And all of a sudden, instead of only a couple hundred people came through the door, 800 people came through the door.
Wow!
And they were just amazed that they would have that many people out to see this band. I said, okay, well, let's try it again. So they decided to have them again, and the same thing happened. They had a ton of people, and that time they were actually a glitter band, Another Pretty Face. They ended up recording albums, and their album got held up in for some sort of legal issues. But they were like the biggest draw on the North Jersey club scene by far. And they played all around, would sell out every place they went. And then what happened was somebody asked them, "Why don't you get Leslie West in there?" Okay. And Leslie West had been, I was just in high school. Mountain was one of the biggest bands going. And so, they went and had Leslie West, and it was just packed. And they said, we're going to change over to rock. So they just started to change over from disco to rock at that time. They yanked the dance floor out. At that time I was still in college. And then when I came back on vacation, that's when I started working there full time during the summer of '76.
Right.
And go ahead.
Oh, it just and I did such exhaustive research of whatever last nook and cranny of the internet had about the showplace, and another pretty face. What I read was that Tico Torres of Bon Jovi was their original drummer.
No, he was actually it was actually when they came. The original drummer was Carl Brazo.
Oh, okay.
And
Tico Torres came later then.
Yes, he came much later. He came after the original band broke up around 1977, 1978. And it was just T. Roth, the singer, and it was T. Roth and another pretty face.
Right.
They didn't have the draw but they were able to put an album out, and Tico Torres was in that band.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Got you. Huh.
So second iteration, basically, of another pretty face.
Yeah, and actually, I got the job through my sister. My sister had been working there and as a bartender and a cocktail waitress, and she was saying, hey, all these different bands are coming into play. She even dated the bass player from another pretty face, Charlie, and so it was good. They were an excellent band, and but they didn't. Their record could not be released because of legality issues.
Oh my.
Yeah.
And lost in the history books.
Right. So yeah. So the owners of the showplace, right? You had Larry Gribler, and I know he recently passed away.
Yes, he did. Yep.
Yes, and then you had so Stephen Benshiff were the brothers, right?
Yes. Yes.
And I'd read that Larry had a career in plumbing, and so his childhood friend, Steve Schiff, they partnered up and they invested in the showplace in Dover, New Jersey. And then I know after the showplace ended and was taken over, I believe so it became a go-go bar, but in the back they had the recording studio.
Yeah, that was later on. They've always had the go-go girls. They've always had the dancers there. Even when I worked there, during the day you'd have the dancers, and at nights you would have the bands.
I didn't know that. Oh wow!
Yeah, the dancers would stop at 8 o'clock, and then you'd have the stage was in a big. The stage was huge, by the way. It was a huge stage.
Huh?
It was like a 30 by 20 foot stage.
Okay.
Nice. Which was very deep, and you were able to stack different bands. When a band would come in, and you stack up their equipment from the headliners' equipment. You know what I mean? It was that big where you could do that.
Huh.
But what happened was like I said, like my sister had got me the job there, and all these different bands were coming in, which was great, and I was saying, wow. I said, look at this, and then all of a sudden, when I first came back from college, the very first band that I was working with was Slade. And they came from England. Now Slade, up a couple of years prior to that, they were on. They didn't have the internet back then. They had like Midnight Special.
That's right, Don Kirshner. Yep.
Yes.
What I mean? And so only maybe a year or two prior to that, you had Slade on there doing Goodbye to Jane and Mom, We're All Crazy Now, and they were like a huge hit. And all of a sudden now they're playing, and they came on and they were absolutely stunning. I mean, they were just so professional, and the sound was just absolutely perfect. And actually, they came back. That was in May. They came back in later on in July, the end of July, and recorded They recorded a couple of shows, and they used some of it for the Live Slate Volume 2.
Oh, sweet!
Wow. So so some of the tracks on there are actually from the showplace in Dover.
From the showplace, yeah. And I remember they had a big truck outside that had had the whole recording equipment in there, and it was incredible. But what happened was at that time too, what really helped us elevate us as a club was we hired a guy by the name of Joe Berger, and he designed and ran the sound system there, which was state of the art back then. No club ever had a system like this. And this is talking like 1976, and I'm talking he had bins, bins and just walls of sound and tremendous. And this bands wanted to play there because they had a huge stage and you had a tremendous sound system. Then Larry had invested in lights, so you had a professional light show then too. Because at that time, whenever you had a big band coming in the beginning, we would rent out a lighting system. This way it was a lot better for us to buy the lighting system and then have one of us run it.
Right. Wow.
For some really remarkable band.
Yeah. And I've even read when I go online, because Facebook does have like a page dedicated to the showplace in Dover, but you'll see more than a few posts in there where they remark about how incredible the sound was in there. That there's very few venues where you're just amazed at the acoustics and in a particular club. And I guess I've seen that Joe Berger is he's a presence on the NAMM convention, which goes out to LA.
Yes.
And
yeah.
he's been in for like going on like 43 years now too, right?
Oh yeah, yep. Mm-hmm.
And I
And
almost dare say,
and it was funny because he would come in there, and he'd just be in the dressing room. He set up a Marshall amp in there, and he'd just be in there playing, all day long. And bands would come in, and some bands he would leave, other bands he would just hang there. You know what I mean? It was but it was time for him to run sound. He just had a right ear for it, and he had the system set up perfectly for this. So
wow,
beautiful,
really remarkable.
I was going to say that had to be one of the big allures of coming to the showplace. Then like for that sound system and for the for the lights and having it all that the band didn't have to bring their own or rent or pray that the sound was going to be good enough.
Right.
Oh yeah, definitely. And and that sound system. I mean, it lasted until I stopped doing bands. I mean, it lasted for a good close to good 15 years. This was terrific though.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I was reading and this one quote I read of I believe it was Larry who said it when he was talking about the Metallica first show with Kirk Hammett at the Showplace in 1983. He said, and I quote, I think we paid them between $500 and $1,000, which is probably like what some cover bands may have been making back then, never knowing 25, 30 years later that Metallica would be in that king spot of heavy metal bands. Larry Gerbler recalled. Then he also says a story about Blondie, Debbie Harry, and that's going to lead right into what Wally's going to tell us something. Debbie Harry came out in her pajamas. She looked great. We had maybe 20 people in the room. Can you imagine that, seeing Blondie with 20 people? We never did her again, is what Larry says. But you had an encounter, right, Wally, with Debbie Harry?
What happened was I think the Ramones were playing there. The Ramones came out, and the whole scene broke in the summer of 1976. The whole punk scene out of New York, and we were like a club in New Jersey that were doing a lot of these bands. We're doing the Ramones, doing Blondie, doing the Dictators, doing the Dead Boys, and on a regular basis too. I mean, television. And so and back then, the DJ booth, you'd put on an album side and then just flip it over. You know what I mean? You wouldn't be changing songs out, especially in a club like the Showplace. And usually we would put on bands we put on their albums, either bands who would play in the club or bands who would be coming in. And this nice artsy looking couple comes up next to me, and they asked me if I could play their 45. It happened to be Debbie Harry, Chris Stein from Blondie. And nobody really knew who they were back then. I mean, especially in New Jersey. And that was the first time I can remember that Blondie was ever played in New Jersey, because they weren't on the radio then. I mean, you didn't have punk rock on the radio back then.
I wonder what the 45 single was. You probably don't remember, right?
It was In the Sun. In the Sun, and the Sun and Ex Offender.
Very good. Wow, you have a great memory.
Yeah, I still have the 45 today, I believe.
Wow,
somewhere
that's fantastic.
Again, but like I said, and then we started bringing all these bands from New York and some bands from England also. Had heard about, through their booking agencies and whatever. And so whenever they came on tour, we would get them. Like we had the Dam coming and they played.
Oh yeah, I know.
Eddie and the Hot Rods.
There were like a few punk bands. I think I even saw that. Like
a lot. We had a lot of punk bands. I mean,
yeah.
Like I said, the Dead Boys. The
Stiv Bators, I believe, is in that band.
Yeah, Stiv Bators and Cheetah Chrome. And then what you'd have certain bands that would follow them would have their own bands. Like a girl by the name of Helen Wheels. She hung out and had her own band, and she used to write songs for Blue Oyster Cult. Well, she was friends with the Dead Boys. She was friends with the Dead Boys. So when she played, she had Cheetah Chrome from the Dead Boys as her guitar player. And which was tremendous. I mean, and everything. So that was good. And like I said, I had a lot of bands from England coming over then too that were trying to get it, and bands like the Cramps. I don't know if you ever heard of them.
Yes, absolutely. They were like art. I remember. I think it was like. What was very kind of iconic, their album covers, I believe, for the Cramps, And
then you had a scene in New Jersey, in central New Jersey, right in Morris County, called the Moco scene, where they were local bands that would play there. Bands like TV Toy, the Royals, and Fast Car was a couple of bands like that, and they would have their own, and they were like local punk or new wave bands.
Mm-hmm.
They're more like new. TV Toy was more like new wave, but they're all excellent musicians. I mean, all those guys. The Royals were like very rockin', punk style. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
the way the Dictators were in a way.
Okay.
Okay.
And now, how did the punk bands like treat the venue? And did the crowd that they draw, was it a little crazier than maybe, let's say, when like the Runaways were there or something, or Leslie West?
Yeah.
I mean,
There were some that were like that. I remember when Ramones first played, and they went on, and people didn't know what to expect. I mean, you heard a write up about them and how they played in the club, and that and everything. They were loud and everything. And when they played, about 10 people started walking out after the first song, during the first song.
Wow.
And they're doing Blitzkrieg Bop, which
Oh.
was a tremendous song.
One of like their best songs.
Yeah, exactly. And they end up coming back there and playing, gosh, at least a dozen times over the next few years. I mean, and I got to become friendly with when you work there, you become friendly with the crew and the bands too. Like Robert Gordon would come in. I don't know if you ever heard of him. A tremendous singer. He did some work with Link Ray. Rockabilly sound, has a terrific voice, and he would always come in and just be very nice and everything, cordial, typical professional. He came in originally with a band called the Tough Darts, which was a punk band, and then he had his own band come up, and he had Rob Stoner, who played with Dylan as his bass player, and like I said, Link Ray was a rockabilly legend from the 50s.
I know the name for sure.
I'll look up the song "Rumble" by Link Ray. That's him, and
a note on that.
Yeah,
but you got here. I'll show you. As long as it doesn't, you can see there's the Ramones. I want to say that is the Showplace stage. If I might be wrong on that, but I believe when I pulled it up, but when I looked back at the the bands that played at the Showplace, the same names kind of kept coming up, like the Ramones had been there just countless times, and I would imagine Leslie West probably played there often.
Leslie West
right?
played there quite a few times. I mean, first band he came out with was absolutely outstanding. When I first saw him, it was Leslie West. His rhythm guitar player was Mick Jones, who would later be in Foreigner.
Right.
And then he had Kenny Aronson from Stories on bass, and last but not least, he had Carmine Appice on the drums.
Wow, from Vanilla Fudge, and
he had an all-star band there.
Wow,
and Robbie's music commercials, if you remember Carmine and Peace.
Exactly. Yeah,
drums and cymbals.
Actually, my band did a show with him back in about 15 years ago, but down in South Florida. Yeah, wow. And actually, one of the things was me and my guitar player got up and we played "Sunshine of Your Love" with him.
From Cream,
because he wanted to do it. He was doing a drum clinic. And then we would get up and we did a number with him. And then we would get to do a song, a set of our own later on, and and everything. And it was tremendous that he was there in that band. But Leslie West, and then little by little, Leslie had some issues back then, and his band kind of like dropping as far as quality went. And but I remember one time it was on a Sunday afternoon, and we knew he was coming because he was coming to get paid. He was going to get an advance. And he comes up to this guy, and this guy says to him, all of a sudden he goes, "Hey, just give the money to him." Now this is the mid '70s. This guy shows up like a '66 Ford Galaxy, and we kind of run down and stuff like this. And we had a guitar set up through the PA already set for Leslie. He said, "Hey Leslie, you want to try it?" Oh, he goes, "Nope, don't have the time." And he just like blew us off, Joe Berger had it set up like that so he could come in and just do that, But like I said, you get to become, and these bands come in late, a lot of times you get to know them and their crew, like Ramones, Arturo Vega. I don't know if he did their artwork, designed their logo.
Oh, I didn't know. Okay, yeah.
And so we'd get shirts from different companies, like with liquor companies or whatever, and there's a product we were pushing, and I gave him a shirt, and he traded me a Ramones shirt for it. And so that was nice, and not too many bands had their own stuff there then, like shirts and everything, hats and everything. Ramones would come in with arms full of shirts and hats to sell, Oh,
that's cool. I was going to say that probably was a little later. I think more bands started, doing the merchandising as far as like the shirts and other
exactly. But Ramones were like one of the first ones to do that, like that. And they're innovators in more than one reason, but they basically took rock and roll, and like I said, they stripped it down, they turned it up and put it in fourth gear, and away they went for 2.5 minutes, 2 minutes, and it was like, for me, it was refreshing because At that time, what you had on, you had, and even though there were some good musicians and everything, you had bands like Yes and Pink Floyd and some of these
prog rock type.
bands, and they would have 15, 20-minute mega songs, and you'd be bored, they brought the single back, and
Right.
They brought the single back,
Yeah, those just great short punk rock songs that, I mean, more ferocity and power in them than some of these, like you said, 15-minute opuses,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I'm believing you. There's some good musicianship in that, but I mean, how long can you listen to it for? And you're losing some of your audience. I mean, definitely, in my opinion.
Right. And as far as like bands are concerned that were there, were there any like personalities like really stood out to you? I mean, in a positive way, or someone that was just always a pleasure to deal with? You could even say like the whole band entity, or a particular personality in a band, whether it be a singer, guitar player. I mean, if there are any memories that come to mind of.
Oh, like I was saying before, like Robert Gordon, he would always come in and acknowledge you, be very nice about it. T. Roth from Another Pretty Face, he would come in and he'd be doing that. But one of the biggest bands that had the rapport was Blackfoot.
Oh yeah.
Now Blackfoot at that time, they a couple of guys had been in Leonard Skinner, and then they were like, they played around locally a lot, and they really didn't care for our place that much in the beginning, and because they had a relationship with other places, and one of our competitors, their place burnt down, and they had no place to play, so they had to come to us in the area, and then they come in and they said, "Wow, listen to this! I mean, they have this tremendous PA system. They have this tremendous light system. How come we haven't been playing here all along? And at that time, then they started. They already had the popularity. There's no question about that. And they came in and they were like very friendly. And they'd even come in on certain nights when they were other bands were playing. And they were off. Which was nice to see that. And that would happen a few times. I mean, different people would come in to see different bands. Like I said, Debbie Harry and Chris Dunn came to see the Ramones.
Oh wow.
David Johansen.
Yep, from New York Dolls.
He was from the Dolls. He would come in to see different bands, like that. I mean, there's a couple of, like when we had Southside Johnny, there were several members from the E Street Band there. The same thing, we had the band that did Eddie and the Cruiser stuff.
John Cafferty.
John Cafferty, right, and Beaver Brown Band. Well, they had a lot of E Street members come to see them, and we had no idea this place was packed.
Yeah. What do you remember? Like your first day there, because you got the job through your sister, like you said, who was bartending there, right?
Right.
So do you remember what was the first week or the few weeks you were there, and who was the first band that you saw there on the Showplace stage?
Okay, the first band I saw over there, and I was still in college at the time, was Leslie West.
Okay, that's a good debut for you.
I mean, my sister said, I was home for the weekend, and she goes, "Hey, who's playing at the club where I work at?" She goes, Leslie West. So of course, I get in there for free. I go in with her and everything. And I started to talk to the owner a little bit, and all I know is the place was packed. And I said, wow. I said, and that was that band that I told you about. That was the all-star band that he had, and they played, and they were tremendous.
Oh, that's right. That was when we had Mick Jones on guitar and Carmen Appice on drums.
Appice,
yes. Right.
Yep. And so what happens? It was during that time, and while I was still at school, they did Thin Lizzy played there. A couple of Quicksilver Messenger Service played there. You have bands like that, and so when I came back, and I came back, the very first band that was there was Slade, and I'd come there, and Slade, I'd be out in the parking lot, and checking for cars, and excuse me, and a few other things, and checking stuff at the door, and then when the band came on, I was right there on the side of the stage, watching them. And because like I said, I was just home from college, and that was my part-time job. And then they asked me if I wanted to work there full time. About a month later, they asked me if I wanted to work there full time, and I was working just basically weekends. And then I said, yeah, okay. So I started working there full time. I took a full-time job. I said, let me do it for this summer and see if I like working here.
Right.
I ended up not going back to school. And then a couple of years later, I did go back to school, but still, I mean, at that time I was 21 years old, and a lot of these people that I'm meeting and everything that, they, like people that I was like fans of theirs, and all of a sudden they're playing where I work. They're playing the club I used to work at, and what it is, I'm like, I know on a name basis with them. I mean, can I get you anything? I'd go to pay them at the end of the night. You know what I mean? And everything. And they come to the office. Either that or managers. But one of the times that summer, it was pretty early in the summer. Was remember Tommy James?
Yeah.
Tommy James and the Shondells, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, he was that time. He was like very on in his career, and he had this thing, and he just put out a new album, and he was signing copies of it, at a mall. And we went there. There's only a few people there, and so we said, "Hey, listen, you're playing at our club later on. You want to go next door? You got something to eat? Maybe have a couple of drinks." Me and Larry and Larry's wife, Marilyn, went, and so here I am with Tommy James, who was an idol.
Oh, wow.
Definitely a big fan. And so he came back to the club that night, and the songs that he played were rocked up versions of the hits that he had, and he was just outstanding, tremendous. Just had a tremendous. To see that like that, I go, wow, this is really exciting to be a part of it. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I know you said like the highlight for you in terms of favorite bands that played the showplace that you saw. You mentioned Slade. Who else would you throw in that? If you had to name a few other bands that just really blew you away with their performance.
Okay, well, who were always excellent was a band called the Good Rats.
Oh yeah,
they were out of Long Island, and they would play, and they would they'd come over, and we built them up a lot in New Jersey. They would come over, and we had them open up for Slade. We had them open up for a lot of other bands, and all of a sudden, and they would definitely and their following grew, and they ended up having several albums. I mean, they had an album on Warner Brothers when they first came here, and
Wow.
And everything, and they were absolutely outstanding. But they played a lot, there was like I said, there was a lot of bands that I saw that like they're on tour, and they might have been like the opening act for like a 3-act bill, you know what I mean? And they were on tour, and they would play with Russ, and they were okay. But there were some bands, like I said, you want to know a band that blew me away was, did you ever hear Rat Race Choir?
Yes, actually. They were they Jersey based, or they were from the Long Island, or
Long Island as well. Now they were a cover band, but they were like, but the versions they would do of their songs would just blow anybody away. You know, people would see them and they said, my gosh. And actually a couple of guys from that band ended up touring with John Entwistle from The Who.
Oh, wow. Crazy.
And the drummer did some work with him, and so did the guitar player, and so that's always neat to see and stuff like that. And you wish people like that a lot of luck, when they go further like that, and what they did.
And I imagine that bands like Thin Lizzy and Leslie West were also pretty tremendous live, would you say? Or?
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. Leslie West, he was, powerful. They were definitely powerful live. Blackfoot was powerful live. You had some people that were just do performances that you would unbelievable. With Rory Gallagher, he was an Irish guitar player, Irish blues guitar player, and he had so much tremendous amount of energy. He came on and he played a 2-hour show, from start to finish. Wow. And then after that, when his band was moving out, he's up in the grand piano that we rented, and he's up there playing the grand piano for a half hour, 45 minutes.
Wow.
Just, because it had a tremendous sound,
Yeah, in my research, I saw that Rory Gallagher played there back in 1977. Like you said, an Irish blues guitar player. Yeah. And it's remarkable what an influence. I don't know how many people know the name. I'm sure, if you're in musical circles, you definitely know the name Rory Gallagher. But outside of that, just his significance on rock music, he was Brian May, and his friend. And now this is when Brian May, pre-Queen, he asked Rory how he got his sound, and Rory showed him. Rory showed him, in other words, on his guitar. Oh, this is how I get my sound. And Brian May said that his future sound was actually shaped by Rory. And Rory Gallagher he's on the Rolling Stone magazine's list of 100 greatest guitarists of all time at 57th place.
Exactly. No doubt. And he was absolutely tremendous. Another guy who was good like that actually blew me away was Roy Buchanan, blues guitar player.
Oh, I actually know. Yeah.
And he basically was a guy. He shunned the spotlight. He just wanted to play clubs and play his hour and a half set, and tremendous. He came out. He's perfect. that's what I mean. Yeah, people that gave these perfect concerts at times, and everything. But you have Rory Gallagher, who is so high energy. That's for sure. Definitely
crazy. But yeah, I mean, and I haven't even. What's so nuts is like, in that intro, I mentioned like all these bands. I've even like covered the other people that played the Showplace. I think I'd mentioned Talking Heads, but you had Chuck Berry, who they said duck walked on the Showplace stage. John Entwistle, actually, who you were just speaking of, played a solo gig there while he was on hiatus from the Who. And Jack Bruce of Cream played there as well.
Jack Bruce is a great note.
Now, was that Halloween night?
Yes, it was. It's Halloween night, and he came out, and all of a sudden he's doing the he had the voice of Cream. There's no question about it.
Oh, yeah.
He was the lead singer of Cream, more so than Clapton was. I mean, but you come out and he'd be doing a lot of the old Cream numbers, and you listen to the voice, and it's so haunting. I mean, you wonder if they were ever going to get back together. And a lot of us, who worked at the club, wanted them to get back together. At that time, but Clapton had his own thing, and everything. And same thing with Ginger and everything. But it was just a pleasure to see Jack Bruce play. Now, there was a band that opened up for Jack Bruce called Shanghai Sideshow, and believe me, they were no opening act. They were did all pyrotronics and everything, and they had a guy come out, and he was like a contortionist in a way, and he was their lead singer. But he was just always all tremendous stuff. I mean, he'd come out with this song. He said, "Rats are my friends," and have a rat be crawling around him. He'd sit in an electric chair and have to go get a jolt. I mean, but that was Halloween night. So we were whatnot, and but like I said, Jack Bruce was just tremendous. He came out and everything, and I had him signed. I had a lot of my albums signed by some of the guys back then, which were nice.
Tremendous.
Definitely, So
I'd even read that the band Blue Angel played the Showplace, which that was fronted by Cyndi Lauper apparently before she broke out as a solo artist. They mentioned in one of the articles I read that they had played the Showplace, but maybe that was back in the disco days, possibly. I'm not sure.
No, well, what it was. See, it was a strange scene back then. Disco came out in 1974 or so. A lot of the bands that were rock clubs, all of a sudden I come home from college, and they're discos now, and I couldn't understand it for the life of me. And then the disco scene started to die down, and then what brought it back was the Bee Gees in that movie, Saturday Night Fever.
Saturday Night Fever, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and they brought it back because disco was dying at that point. Because like I said, the Showplace started off as a disco, and they changed it over in late '75, early '76. And then when then it came out, and we were competing with discos back in
like Studio 54, right, in New York City.
Yeah, exactly. Now I wasn't there, and I didn't see Cyndi Lauper's band play there, but actually from what I understand, I think she was a drummer too.
I want to say you're right on that too, right, Nick? Or
yeah,
that sounds very familiar to me.
Or
yeah.
It was funny. I read a quote from Larry Gribler where he said, "What we found was that the disco crowd was not a heavy drinking crowd, and the kids, of course, were dead broke." So, yeah, that's such a funny, thing how that transition happened, right? Where you had the disco sucks, quote that people started to adopt. I saw a documentary recently about how the Bee Gees documentary, in fact, mentioned that, and it just became like a mantra for a lot of people. And that's what the Bee Gees kind of got run out of town after a while because they were seen as a joke, and everybody saying, disco sucks, and it wasn't hip to disco at that point anymore. And I imagine that really opened a door for bands like the Ramones, right? Where there's just this incredible punk energy, right, and all these local kids that would get together to see them at these various venues, including the Showplace.
And you got to remember, punk rock, when it first came out, was not all that popular. Same thing with New Wave. You had the Misfits in life, the Outcasts, who were their fans, and not the everyday people and everything. But then after a while, they did get more mainstream, and they came out with a couple of very potentially commercial songs. She is a punk rocker. A perfect single song, it didn't get the airplay it should have, but I think it did break the top 40 if I'm not mistaken in some areas, but that should have been a top 10 song in my opinion.
Now Glenn Danzig and the Misfits never made their way to the Showplace, did they?
No.
Yeah, I didn't see their name on there, and so what were your duties? Would you say first of all, let me before I even ask that. Who did the bookings for the show place? Do you know?
Yeah, Larry did.
Larry did. And
Larry did. And
how did Larry? I mean, how was Larry able?
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just wondering, like, how was Larry able to get, like, did the show place, in other words, sell itself that you're able to get such an incredible caliber of artists there? You know.
Well, you were dealing also with, agencies like Premier Agency. They did a lot of the bookings for a lot of the clubs and concert halls. Now you got to at one time we got blocked by having quite a few acts because John Shear,
oh yeah,
who booked the Capitol, which is a larger venue than ours, said, "Hey,
yep.
listen," they would tell these bands, "Hey, you play at that place, you don't even bother coming to me, looking for a job." You know what I mean?
Wow.
And there's things like that. And there are only a couple of clubs in New Jersey that were doing bands like that, like recording acts every weekend. There's maybe us. There might have been City Gardens in Trenton.
Yep.
But they were a lot smaller venue. You know what I mean? And there were a lot of places they were not doing it. That did have the room. We're not doing it. You know, I mean, like that. But we were, and like consistently, we're bringing different acts and different types of acts, not just punk. We had like one weekend we had Buddy Rich band play, Buddy Rich orchestra play.
Wow.
And every drummer, who was around had that night off.
Oh yeah,
I believe it.
Every drummer, every band, these guys from different bands and everything, and they'd come in, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
And during the week, we prided ourselves in being an original club. I mean, during the week, you'd have the local bands that would do the originals, and so it got known as a place you could play your originals, for a band coming up, you know what I mean? But like Larry was booking the bands, and and there's a couple of different people that we find out who was touring, how are these people doing, I mean, like that, and certain bands would be coming into New York to play and everything. Like we actually had Devo at a very good time when they played, because they were on Saturday Night Live like the week before.
I've seen that performance, in fact.
And we had what's the name of the band? They did Meatloaf, Bat Out of Hell, right?
Oh yeah.
Meatloaf, when we booked Meatloaf, they had they had a couple of top 10 songs in the country. Their album was in the top 10. But it wasn't like that when we booked them. When we booked them, it was way down. But by the time they played at our place, they were at the top. They were the top of So sometimes you have good bookings like that.
Yeah.
And word spreads too. You know what I mean? Like bands from like the New York City bands a lot. The bands that played CBGBs and Max's Kansas City back then, like the Ramones and Blondie. They'd be going back and they'd be telling different people, "Hey, there's a place in New Jersey. Why don't you check that place?" So we'd get calls. We'd get calls from a lot of different groups and organizations that wanted to book their bands in there, and as well too. Besides us looking for bands, because we'd be looking for different bands. Are these people touring now? I mean, we actually had we inquired about getting Rush in there, and
get out.
This is like 1976, and but as I said, we were blocked by John Shear. We wanted to try to get Johnny Winter in, blocked by John Shear. But we got Edgar Winter. Edgar Winter played there.
Yes, I did see that. Which that's big. I mean, Edgar Winter.
Edgar had some.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's some really nice acts there. That's for sure. Cheap Trick played. Cheap Trick played.
One of my favorite bands, actually.
Yeah, and they come in when they're on tour, and when they come in, their guitar player comes in with 30 guitars.
Yeah, Rick Nielsen, right?
Oh yeah, and the roadies had them. They had them all lined up and everything, because he would change the guitars almost every song. Just like the way the Stones do now. When they play, they change the guitars every song.
I guess for different tunings, right? Maybe.
Oh yeah, different tunings, different songs. I mean, I do that too.
Yeah.
I'm a bass player, so
Yeah, we definitely want to even delve into that. I just want to show, you can see in this ad for the show place, Metallica, and just a little band called Anthrax that was opening up. I mean, and you can see like original bands, top 40 bands, comics, magicians, soloists. Call Larry for auditions, and there's the number. Do not call that number, because right now the place it's really it's a vacant building at this point. I pass it every single day.
Really,
And what's so crazy, Wally, is that I moved here recently to Randolph, New Jersey, and it's only a 1-minute drive down. Like, I turn left out on the street, and I'm there in under a minute at the show place. I pass it every day, and it was only until someone told me, like, I said, "Oh, that go-go bar, I see it's vacant. It's like it's gonna, it's been sitting there for a while like that." And then, said person was like, do you know who, like the history of that place? I'm like, no, and then when they started to mention, all the crazy big acts that played there, I was just amazed. What a rich history it has that, I don't, you don't hear about it often. In other words, in terms of the, the music folklore. How's that for the live scene? So just really, really impressive.
Here's a question for you, Wally. Like, how would you at the time compare like the Jersey music scene to like like you mentioned CBGB's, Wally's Kansas City, like to the New York scene at the time? Like, what was the draw for a band that don't play the city? Hey, come to Jersey. We got the place for you to play here. Like what was the scene difference between the two?
Well, the clubs in New York, I mean, even though they had tremendous names, they're basically small clubs. We had a huge place. I mean, you go to CBGB's and it was very small. You walk in, it's tiny, but you have the name there. You walk into Max's Kansas City, same thing. I mean, it was a small place on the second floor of a restaurant and stuff. But one thing that we had going for us was we had we had the sound system in there, and like I said, in the PA, we had a huge stage. And now granted, a lot of bands, they were on tour, some of these bands, and we'd say, and they basically, we'd offer them, probably the same amount of money, if not more, or not, probably the same amount of money to play in New York, but they'd be playing at a bigger place, and it potentially could reach a larger audience.
Right.
That's one thing, but the one thing too. I mean, and New York City sometimes, it's nice to play there. I played there a few times. Logistically, it's a nightmare sometimes to go get in there, find a place to park, get your equipment, bring it around and everything like that. And, even though like these bands have road crews and stuff, still, it's not as easy as it is, playing in the suburbs. That's for sure.
Right.
And Wally, I know you were in a band, the Chillers. Are you still active? Is the Chillers still active?
Well, we're on hiatus right now because of COVID. Unfortunately, our drummer passed away.
Sorry to hear that.
Now we have been working with somebody else, and she's excellent. We've worked with her a number of times over the years. And the guitar player lives right down the street from me. We get together, quite often. It's still to keep fresh and everything. But with COVID and everything, and we want to go back and record again. We've recorded, probably about 9 independent albums. We have over 100 songs on YouTube.
Wow, that's a lot.
Wow. over 100 originals on YouTube.
And the band was really inspired like surf garage rock. I mean, like we're like the Ventures and Dick Dale.
We played at the Show Place. We called ourselves a legend back then. Back in 1989, and we still played in the big stage, the huge PA system, the lighting system. And then what happened was we decided we got to change the name of the band. We thought I'd have to change the name of the band, so we ended up changing it to. I was in the HVAC business, and ended up changing to the Chillers. And
good.
So then what happened was we thought we were trying to be the next Rolling Stones or next Cream. For 15 years, we're beating our heads against the wall. When we came up with a surf instrumental, and then what happened was that instrumental got picked up, and it was on on a couple of shows and everything and like that, and got played all around the world. And the second one we did wrote ended up being a movie, a low budget movie. And we said, you know what, let's just stick with this. So we started to write more and more songs about surfing and hot rods. And
what else is there in life?
we actually fell into a niche into that, and actually me and the drummer have surfed. And I have a hot rod. I have a hot rod to this day. I got a Corvette outside.
Oh, sweet. What year?
2013.
Nice.
Fantastic.
But growing up, I had a GTO. I had a Dodge Charger. I had a 63 Impala.
Muscle cars.
Yeah.
So actually, I can write about it easy enough. The way not like the way Brian Wilson could come up with words like that. I can do the same thing with our songs. If you listen to some of our songs, you can find that on there. And we've known each other for 40 years easily. The drummer and I grew up together, and our fathers grew up together. And the guitar player lives right down the street from me. We've been friends since high school, since the early 1970s.
What you play bass guitar, right? While
yes.
For the band, what drew you in particular, maybe to the bass, as opposed to playing guitar, drums, or maybe even singing, right?
Well, actually, I tried. I was a singer originally when I first started out in the bands, and then I said, "Oh, let me try a 6-string." And then what happened was this guy he wanted to sell his bass. He needed to sell his bass. He needed money and everything. And my friend of mine was playing guitar at that time, and so I said, you know what? Let me buy his bass. It was a beautiful bass too, and it was a Tobias bass. It was at that time it was about a $700 or $800 bass. I ended up selling it to him for like $100, you know, for. And so I just started teaching myself, and I ended up taking formal lessons, and you know, and then I actually just came up and had done it, you know what I mean, which is fine, you know, I mean, it's good like that.
I think I saw in one of your photos, it was a real heavy, and I want to say it's a Fender bass. It's a very heavy bass guitar. I don't know if you remember the model.
I have 4 Fenders. I have 2 jazz basses and 2 precision basses.
Okay.
Now,
I just know I recognize the name, and the only reason I recognize the name of the model of that bass guitar is because they were talking about when Nirvana played Saturday Night Live, and I guess what's his name, Nick, the bass player's Kurt Novoselic or something, right?
Oh yeah.
He threw his bass up in the air, and so Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters was saying that is like that bass is like it's the weight of an anvil apparently, you know, that it came down on his head and split his head open, and that's when you see him staggering around the SNL stage, you know, these days. Because of all the bass guitars that that's not the one you want. But I saw pictures of it on your site, Wally. That's why I mentioned it. But
yeah, I have a few basses, you know, that we played and everything like that. So you know, we tried to get the best equipment we could. You know, I mean, why not? You want to make yourself sound good. You know, I mean, I had a guitar a bass that I wanted to keep around and just use it for smashing at the end of one of our songs. I never got a chance to do it. I ended up giving it away to somebody before I had a chance to smash it.
Oh, you could have. If you were playing bass back then, you could have given it to John Entwistle to give to Pete Townsend, you know?
No, probably so.
Yeah. All right.
At that point, yeah, definitely. But,
you have any other questions, Nick, on your side? I don't want to I
was wondering, like, what were some of the biggest, like, as far as the different acts that played at show plays, what were some of the biggest surprises to you? Like, you weren't expecting, like,
give me 1 minute.
How well they played, the ferocity, the draw, you know, like who was probably like some of the biggest surprises for you?
Well, one of the big surprises was when I mentioned when John Cafferty Beaver Brown Band played. We thought maybe a couple dozen people at most. All of a sudden, 400 people come through the door. You know, that was tremendous. I mean, you had certain bands you knew they would draw well. You know what I mean? As far as whether, you know, like. One band I was really surprised at how much equipment they brought in was Nectar. Nectar was a German band, and they were like a very progressive German band. And they came in with this tremendous light show that took up half the club.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I mean, you know that like that. But they ended up playing there a few times. The next time they came, they didn't bring the big light show. But we couldn't get people in there because it took up so much room.
People standing on some of the equipment.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I mean, you know, like Larry said, I think he was over exaggerating a little bit when he said Blondie only had 20 people. There was more than 20 people there, but you know, but I think he was exaggerating a little bit. I was surprised that it didn't draw as well because Blondie was a known name at that time, and they didn't draw as well as they could have. But still, they're very professional. They came out very, very good. You know, I mean, there's no question about that. You know.
Did you ever get put into the position of you had booked act let's say like you booked one act, you know, like we'll say act X, and then like an hour before they're supposed to play you get a call that hey, they can't play tonight. Ever get any of those like last minute switches that you had to make? Or
yeah, I'm trying to remember name the band that came in, and it was he played in free. He was a guitar player for free. And what happened was he came out and he ended up showing up with a broken finger. He couldn't play guitar.
Oh.
But he was a guitar player for free at that time. I couldn't remember his name. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I was just Paul Kossoff.
Okay.
And the name of his band was Backstreet Crawler. And what happened was he comes in, you know, we booked him. He's a guitar player, you know, he was a guitar player for free, you know, I mean, and then he comes and shows up and he doesn't play. He goes, "Oh, I can't play. I got a broken finger." He holds up his finger like that. Now that was not very good.
He was not all right now. Yeah.
No. Thin
That was good, Nick.
Lizzy was supposed to play a Friday and Saturday night. Back then you book bands, they play both Friday and Saturday night. Same thing. That's like Slade played. They played Friday and Saturday.
Oh, okay.
Back in the beginning, that's what it was. They were playing the whole weekend. It was nice. And but what happened was Thin Lizzy, they showed up the first night on Friday night, and then they canceled the Saturday.
Oh.
They canceled. So they left us holding the bag a little bit. Like that. And what are you gonna do?
What happened? Did you guys if you want to say have like one of those break in case of emergency call up this band, hey, can you get here?
Yeah, but it wasn't the same. You have to have a major act. But actually, one of a band I used to be in right out of high school, and became friends with the guys and stuff like that. We were all friendly and stuff, and we had a band that they couldn't show up, and so at 6 o'clock at night, I said, "Hey, listen, you guys play tonight? You go on at 9:30." And they came and played, and everything. They ended up having a good relationship with the club. And a couple of guys ended up working there at the club in different capacities over the years.
Oh, wow.
Like that. So actually one guy, Mike Mosgrove, who's a good friend of mine back from those days, he ended up running lights. And he ended up, when Chuck Berry played, he was in Chuck Berry's band. Chuck Berry would show up at a club. He'd show up at a club with his guitar, and he'd drive up his Cadillac, show up with his guitar, and you'd have to supply him with an amp, a band, and he doesn't come with his own band. So, a lot of the guys know the Chuck Berry songs and stuff like that. So it's easy enough to play. You just got to know what key you're playing in. Because Chuck changes keys all the time.
And he had that big Gibson Lucille, I remember, right? That was his guitar?
No, Lucille's was...
no, that was B.B. King.
Oh, B.B. King. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But he did play the Gibson ES335, and he played that. And
yeah,
he had that. But, and that's what I said. And my good friend Mike, when they needed a band, so he said, "I'll put together a band and we'll back up Chuck Berry," So they did, and they went over, of course, like that. And, and that's the way Chuck is, though, We tried to get Jerry Lee Lewis there actually the booking agency told us don't bother with him.
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Nick and I were really lucky that we went to the opening of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum out in Ohio the first day, and they had a concert, and it was just like so many greats out there, right, Nick? I mean, we saw Chuck Berry, we saw Little Richard. It was just anybody and any,
James Brown played.
Yeah, James Brown played,
really?
right? Hart was there. I mean, it was just an amazing lineup. But
Johnny Cash, John Mellencamp, Bruce played. He actually wound up jamming with a lot of the different acts.
Oh yeah,
over there.
He likes to do that. He does that here. He does that at the shore a lot here. All of a sudden you just hear, this band was playing, and guess who came in the club and jammed with them? You know what I mean? And and you hear that quite often.
Yeah, that Bruce shows up.
I remember seeing a show at the Art Center years ago, and it was John Fogerty. And it was a double bill, him and Willie Nelson, and it's like, hey, we found this other kid backstage with a guitar, but we want to know if he can play with us, and it was Bruce.
Does that a lot, and the crowd goes nuts, no doubt. You're so popular, such an iconic name, like I said, when a lot of the bands like when Southside Johnny played, and a couple of things like that, and you'd have people from the East Street Band come and seeing them, and everything like that, and they could have been, there's different people that came in to see different people, like I said, the one time David Johansen, and I didn't know the Dolls had broken up then, and I asked him, I said, hey, why don't you get the Dolls to play here, and he goes, oh, I'm working on something different, now. I didn't know the Dolls had broken up, you don't realize how much certain problems certain bands have, and he came back, he played, the David Johansen group, and he sounded just like he did with the Dolls,
Wow.
Yeah.
And for those not familiar with David Johansen and the New York Dolls, you might remember him later in the 80s. He was also known as Buster Poindexter.
Yes, that's right. Reinvented himself. Yeah. Yeah, very influential band, the New York Dolls, for the glam scene, right?
They were. Definitely.
For you all, I mean, what what do you miss most about like the music scene of like, let's say the 70s, 80s? Like, did you see a shift and did you go along with the tide? I mean, and enjoy it, or you just were kind of pining for the days of like the 70s and maybe early 80s, something like that, for bands that you enjoyed, seeing at the showplace and outside of it?
Well, a lot of the bands back then, we mentioned a lot of bands that we saw were basically based on blues. You know what I mean? Like Jack Bruce and Rory Gallagher, Blackfoot. A lot of and Good Rats too. A lot of their songs are based on blues, and they took it to rock. Right now, when punk and new wave came out, it really, like I said, it brought back the 3-minute single or the 2-minute single. In my opinion, it didn't take on the way it should have. But what did take off on that was an offshoot of the punk scene was new wave. And a lot of those new wave bands hit, and I didn't care for new wave songs. New waves, it's too artsy for me. I was into rock. I was into rock. You mentioned the Who before. Who was one of my all-time favorites.
Awesome.
Got it.
And everything like that. And those, there's 3 musicians and plus Roger Daltrey, and they come out and they rock.
Yep.
And everything like that. And that's what I like to see. ZZ Top. I like them because they came out and rocked. You know what I mean? And everything like that. But now, when the 80s came out and new wave started to take over, and so the artsy sound, I wasn't into that. So I started to go back into to find the blues. I started listening a lot more to Willie Dixon, Muddy Waters. And everything. I go, wow, this is where this came from. I go, this is where this came from. I started, just doing my research on it and saying, okay, I'm saying, okay, well, this is where these guys got their influence from. I go, that's what I want to do. And so I went back as far as I could with that scene, and I missed out on the 80s scene so much. You know what I mean? A Flock of Seagulls, and there's some good bands there, definitely, but they weren't my cup of tea at that particular time. You know?
Understood on that.
Like I said, and then when I started my own band, back in the late 80s, it was more of a rock band. We wanted to bring that back, that late 60s, early 70s sound of rock. And then we, everything, things change, too. Like that.
Absolutely. So, did you play Joey Harrison's at all with the Chillers or no?
No. They actually, that place got wiped out in Superstorm Sandy.
Yeah, I did see that. I was wondering, like, prior to that, if you had played there, because your sound is like so synonymous with the Jersey Shore. I mean, that it just fits perfectly. Like out in California, I mean, you would be maybe like headlining every venue out there for the surf sound. Yeah.
Well, we actually I saw Dick Dale at that place, Lavalette, and Ortley Beach, either Ortley or Lavalette.
Oh, okay.
Joey Harrison saw.
Yeah.
And he was tremendous. You know what I mean? The king of surf guitar. And it's right on the ocean. It's right on the ocean. We used to play at EJ's a lot. EJ's place right on the boardwalk of Seaside. Played at Franco and Johnny's at Seaside. The Pony. Played the Asbury Lanes.
Oh, very nice. That's another classic venue.
Oh yeah, great place, and played a lot of places, played a few places up and down the Jersey Shore, played a few festivals, and enjoyed that. And it was a lot of fun, definitely.
Excellent.
Yeah. So, Pete, do you have any questions for?
No, I think because I know we're running like low on time here. We're like, did you want to do your trivia game, Nick, or not trivia?
Okay, yeah. Well, although I'll modify it slightly because we've mentioned a few of the clubs.
There you go. We usually play a game at the end of our show, Wally, where we have to. Again, Nick, you can introduce it.
One of the games we like to play is Jersey, not Jersey, and what we were going to do is clubs. As far as the music clubs, and I was going to mention Tri-State music clubs, and you let me know whether it was a Jersey club or not a Jersey club.
Okay.
So you ready to play?
Sure.
Okay.
Do 5. How's that?
Yeah, I was going to say because I had a couple in there like Max's Kansas City that we mentioned.
Right. Yeah.
That's out.
Go ahead. You had Maxwell's in Hoboken.
Yeah, exactly. Maxwell's Hoboken. Actually, that was one of the ones on my list as well. Yeah, and some of the bands that played there was amazing, including you mentioned Dick Dale. He played it.
Yeah.
Okay. How about this one? How about Club Benet? Is that a Jersey venue or not a Jersey venue?
Jersey venue, right in Sagerville.
Oh yeah.
It is absolutely a Jersey venue. I know that was frequented by Mr. Bon Jovi, John Bon Jovi. And we used to go see, who did we? We went to go see, what's his name? John Valby, right, Nick?
Oh yeah, we saw Dr. Dirty
back
John
in the day. Yep.
Yeah, and other bands that played there were like again, Leslie West, some of the ones that played Motorhead, Ringo Point, Danny Elfman there, the Ramones.
You guys are forgetting the most important band that played there, my own band.
Oh, very nice, Bane. I didn't know that.
Famous
Yeah,
band.
it was Bane and the Gotham City Destroyers.
Yeah, I bet. Oh God.
Okay, here's another one. L'Amour, also known as L'Amour's. Was that a Jersey venue or not a Jersey venue?
Not a Jersey.
Nope, that was out in Brooklyn. I used to drive out to L'Amour's when I was like 17 years old. I was a maniac and just I went to see a lot of some great bands there.
Yeah, I saw a few acts there over at
Iron Maiden played L'Amour's, if I'm not mistaken.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
How about you mentioned Asbury Lanes, but what about the Fast Lane? Was that a Jersey venue or not a Jersey venue?
Fast Lane, Jersey venue.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna have to go to Wally because he knows his club, so I'm gonna say yes.
Oh,
it
yeah.
is
That's Asbury.
In Asbury.
That's
Okay.
Asbury. That's right next to the Asbury Lanes.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Did you throw the Saint in there too, Nick, or no?
No, I did not throw the Saint
All
in
right.
there.
Another iconic venue.
And apparently at the Fast Lane, Bruce saw the Ramones play there, and he wanted to because Bruce had also written, like he's a songwriter, not just for himself but for others, and he wrote the song "Hungry Heart," and he was going to give it to the Ramones, but his manager said, "Nah, why don't you keep that one?"
Wow. I never knew that one.
How about the Empire Rock Club?
I would say yes.
Me too, and I think that was in New York. I mean, hence the name, but
No, well, that was Philadelphia.
oh,
Philadelphia.
okay.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, that was a Philly club, right over the border.
Okay.
So a lot of South Jerseyans would hop back and forth at that one.
Yep.
Right.
That's for sure.
How about the Mud Club?
Mud Club. Yes. Jersey.
I'm also
Oh no,
gonna say
Mud Club was in New York. I'm thinking about the Dirt Club.
Right.
Mud Club's in New York.
You're correct on both.
all right. Yeah, and I would have said yes.
I got them both. I got them mixed up.
Yeah, the one is the Mud Club is like afterwards, after you add some moisture to it. So
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly.
and how about we mentioned it before, but how about City Gardens? Was that a Jersey club or not a Jersey club?
Jersey.
100% Jersey.
Oh,
that was a
yeah.
big punk venue. I remember like the Circle Jerks, Dead Kennedys would play there.
Yeah.
We never even talked about like Black Flag, Henry Rollins, right?
Yeah, Black
Wally?
Flag played at Showplace. That was the last show. That was the last show I worked was Black Flag.
Oh,
Wow.
get out.
Yeah, that was the last
How was
show I
that?
worked
Was
there.
Henry Rollins easy to deal with, or I mean,
It really, those guys were quiet. I mean,
Yeah.
The funny thing about it was they had like interaction with the crowd, and there were guys, and we never saw it. There were guys running up on the stage and jumping up, just diving off the stage. And their last number, they had two of the guys on stage traded instruments, and they had somebody out of the crowd come up and play on something, and you really couldn't tell that it really, the sound was there. That's for sure.
Wow.
but they never did like any damage inside the club, the kids, for some of the like more raucous shows, or no?
No, not really. We had a pretty good security crew, and the guys were like a bunch of bikers and stuff. So
Oh,
not too many people wanted to mess with them too much.
No.
Oh, but back to Jersey.
oh
Gardens,
yes.
City Gardens, really quick. Yeah, that's where Danzig, being that you mentioned him before, Pete. Yeah, that's where they made their debut actually as Danzig.
Oh, that was their first gig.
Yeah,
I
and
never knew that, huh?
being that I think Wally mentioned Flock of Seagulls, they made their American debut there as well.
Oh God,
Oh, I didn't know that. Really?
there's a trivia fact for it.
And one last trivia fact about City Gardens: they had a cool bartender. His name, Jon Stewart.
Oh, really? The comedian Jon Stewart?
Yes.
Wow.
Wow.
He was a bartender at City Gardens.
That's some history.
But to thank Wally actually for coming. You had something else to add, Peter?
No, just I would just quickly say also that the recording studio that was in the back of the show place, just remarkable in terms of who they had, and I'll just say just a few names like Eric Clapton recorded there, Keith Richards contributing to a solo album, and Warren Haynes of the Allman Brothers. But
Oh my God.
I'll end with that. I mean, just to show you, like I said, how iconic of a venue and recording studio that it was.
Yeah.
But I want to thank you though, Wally, for
Yeah.
Very welcome, guys. It was a real pleasure. It's a real pleasure spending this afternoon with you guys too. Definitely.
You too, Wally.
Definitely a pleasure talking to you and hearing such great stories.
Yes, very entertaining.
Again, I wish we all could kind of just jump in a quick time machine and go back to the place and live music again. But quick ending here. Do you guys ever think that we'll get a live music scene like? Again, I don't think like the 70s, but do you think live music will come back in some way, shape, form? More so than it is now, because like I know that is sort of a dying art, actually.
Yeah, well, you got to get more people involved in playing more. That's you get people involved, and they become interested, and they want to play, and they see what else is going on. They see what the competition is doing. They see what else is doing, and they enjoy it. I mean, you have to be enjoyable. When you get up there and play, you're playing for the audience. I mean, and you've got to be able to read an audience. How many guys can do that now? I don't know. I mean, there's some people that can do that. Some people can't.
Yeah.
Especially when you're playing in clubs. It depends on who you're going to see. I mean, they would be very steady, on who they're seeing. And but as far as I mean, I've seen it different though at different places that we played at and everything. We'd go to some place and it'd be like everything would be perfect. We'd play the same exact set at another place and we didn't get a response. We did the exact same thing. We did the exact same thing. And then it was funny. I mean, there was this show that I had on videotape. It was maybe about 15 years ago at a small club in Asbury called Club Jimmy. It's right next to the Stone Pony.
Mm-hmm.
And we played. Okay. When we played, I didn't think. I said, it was okay. And I never saw. I watched the tape maybe once. I never watched it again. Well, it brought it out about a year ago, and it was on CD now or DVD now. And I watched it. I go, wow, that was a lot better show than I remember it to be. And it's funny, and the crowd was into it. I mean that, and I'm surprised. I go, wow. I said, I don't remember being like that. And like I said, sometimes the years, your memory changes a little bit of certain things. Definitely. But
right.
I'd like to see it back then. But it depends who's playing. I mean.
Mm-hmm.
You go around to certain clubs around here, and it depends who's playing. I mean, you'll get a good response. You know what I mean? And no matter who's there. I mean, you go to some places and it's better than a doornail.
Yeah,
very true. Yeah, so we need to be cautiously optimistic. Maybe that music will return.
I'd like to see it come back like that.
Live music,
see a good band. I'd like to see a good band. I mean,
me too.
I mean, and a good friend of mine. He played around here in one time, I think in October. He played at a festival in October, and it was great seeing him again because I hadn't seen a live band like that in a while.
Mm-hmm.
The Accelerators, a friend of mine, Ron Knoll,
Mm-hmm.
and his band is called the Accelerators, and they're a punk band. And he's dated my sister for a long time and stuff like that. And just to see him play was tremendous, And I used to put on my own shows back here. I mean. And everything for a while there. I called the show to Bash in the Bay, and I'd have this outdoor festival. I had it run like about 3 or 4 years in a row, and it got to be so big, it got out of control. Not out of control, but it got out of hand for me to run it and to play at it. You know what I mean?
Of course.
Yeah. Can't be everywhere at once. Yeah.
No, but I set up the PA system. The background, the backdrop was the Bay, the Barnegat Bay.
Oh.
And and had a couple of different bands come through over a couple of years, and it sounded really good. Had the PA system set up just right, his instrument set up right, but like I said, I mean, you try to make your own scene sometimes. That's what I try to do then,
Mm-hmm. Right.
So,
Wally, thank you so much.
Yes, Wally, thanks so much. We had a great time.
Yeah,
people want to check out your music, the Chillers. You said you have a YouTube channel.
We have over 100 tunes on YouTube. Actually, every song that we recorded, I made a video to it. So what you see is a video collage behind the studio song and everything. There's a couple of live songs on there too. Where it's just us live in certain clubs and everything like that. And you got to remember, too about bands now. I mean, what kind of scene do you want to have? You want to have an original scene, where you have bands playing their own original music, or you want to have bands playing cover tunes, copy tunes, you know, which are very good, you know, cover bands. But I mean, I'd rather see somebody writing their own stuff, in my opinion. You know, I want to see what they put together.
Agreed.
Yes.
Excellent.
You know, and there's some excellent songwriters down here too. So,
Right.
Definitely.
Yep.
Now, so if you can, please check out the Chillers on YouTube.
The Chillers, right?
Killers, yes.
The Chillers, yeah. And
Yep.
subscribe to their YouTube channel.
And you know, if you're in Dover, New Jersey, you know, and happen by, you know, the show plays.
Yeah, take a snapshot. You know?
Will do. It's been a while since I've been up there.
You can send it to us. You know, like we're whatexitpodcast@gmail.com,
Okay.
or tweet it at exit what.
There you go.
What exit? There you go. I like that. So, okay,
Great.
guys. Good afternoon.
All right.
Take
Hey,
care.
Wally, have a great afternoon, and thank you so much for joining
Okay.
us. It was a
Thank you, guys.
blast.
Take care now. Okay.
See you
bye-bye.
soon. Yep.
Yep.
Take care.